snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys! So I am here today to do a book review. Actually, I'm going to be doing a joint review because I recently read 2 short story e-magazines which I am subscribed to through Kindle. Every month I get a magazine delivered from Lightspeed and from Clarkesworld. Actually, I think Uncanny might be every 2 months. But at the start of each month I get some of them delivered onto my Kindle directly because I just subscribe to them. And so today I want to talk to you about what I thought of Uncanny issue number 8 and Clarkesworld issue number 114. So let's start off with Clarkesworld because I very much enjoyed this issue overall. I'm going to break it down into a couple of the short stories within there and tell you what I rated them, and then I might talk a little bit in detail about the ones I really enjoyed. So let's get started. So Clarkesworld is divided into a few different categories. We have the non-fiction, the classic fiction, and then the fiction. The fiction is all of the new stuff that has been specifically chosen for that single issue. The non-fiction is obviously non-fiction articles about various different SFF topics, and the classic fiction is older stuff that's already in short form that's been published somewhere else and is being republished in this new issue. So the first one I'm going to talk to you about from issue 114 is Salvage Opportunity, which is by Jack Skillingstead. This one I was interested in, but I didn't love it. I ended up giving it a 2.5. It's about a salvage yard and a man in space on his own. He's quite lonely, he has a companion. It was interesting, but it didn't really capture my attention as much as I would have liked. I don't think it's the most memorable in there. The next one I read was 7 Cups of Coffee, which I did enjoy. This one is by A.C. Wise, and it was a sort of miniature time travel story, and it kind of was quite sad actually, which I wasn't really expecting, but I liked it overall. I think that one was a little bit more personal than the first one, so I gave that one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next one I read was Governess with the Mechanical Womb by Lena Licitalo, and I have to say this was one that I just really remember vividly. Even though I read the magazine a while ago now, I still vividly remember this one, and I really enjoyed this whilst I was reading it. It's about this nanny who comes to care for these children when their parents have gone, and she is essentially some sort of mechanical person. She doesn't really have emotion, she doesn't seem to connect with the children at all, and it's all very regimented, and I really enjoyed this one. Lena Licitalo is definitely an author I will be watching out for, and if she publishes anything long format then I will pick it up. I'm not sure if she has already, but I definitely want to check out more of her stuff in future, and I gave that one 4 out of 5 stars. The next one in there was Coyote Invents the Land of the Dead. This was by Kij Johnson, and I was so happy to see a Kij Johnson story because you guys know I recently read At the Mouth of the River of Bees by Kij Johnson and loved it, so I was very much hoping that I would enjoy this one as well. She does write magical realism, so it's sometimes a bit weird and a bit out there. This one definitely was, but I really enjoyed it still, and it was about searching for lost loves, it was about death, it was beautiful and it was moving, and the narrator was really good, and I gave that one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think that was my favourite one in the whole issue, just closely followed by the Lena Licitalo one. The next one in there was Chimera, which is by Jushi, and this one I was pleasantly surprised by because I'd never heard of the author before, but it was about genomes and about genetic modification, and I really enjoyed that. It's a topic I don't know an awful lot about, but I find really fascinating, so I gave that one a 4 out of 5 stars overall. Moving on to the classic fiction section, the 2 classic pieces that were in issue 114 were The King of Norway, which is by Cecilia Holland, and this one was a very sort of old world historical fantasy. I wasn't that interested in it. It kind of had this sort of Viking Norse feel to it, and I just didn't get that interested in it. The story just didn't captivate me, I think because I've read a lot of fantasy and I like it to be longer than it was. It wasn't enough, so I only gave that one a 2 out of 5 stars. The next one was Grey Wings, which was by Carl Bunker, and I liked that one overall. It was a story about flying, as the name suggests, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. There were 2 articles in the non-fiction section that I wasn't a huge fan of. That was Psychedelia in Film and also the Star Wars costumes articles. Neither of them particularly interested me because I don't have a real passion for Star Wars or psychedelia, but there was an interview included which was with Charlie Jane Anders, who is the author of All the Birds in the Sky, and it really made me want to read that book soon. So I definitely will be picking up that book really soon because the author sounded fantastic in the interview, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the book plays out as well. On the whole, I was pleasantly surprised by some of the authors in here. There are always a few that I'm not really a big fan of, but that's what tends to happen when you get magazines or e-magazines. Because it's a collection of different authors from all over the place, you're never guaranteed to like everyone. But I was really pleasantly surprised by some of the ones that I did like, so I gave this an overall rating of 4 stars. Moving on to Uncanny issue number 8. Uncanny comes out every 2 months, so instead of every month it comes out every 2, and Uncanny has a different division within it. So again, it has fiction and non-fiction, but it also has miscellaneous, which can include all sorts of things, and it has poetry, so that's pretty interesting as well. Starting off with the fiction section, the first one I read was The Virgin Plays Bass, which is by Maria Devona Headley. This was my first one of her works, although I have heard of her before, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. It was kind of a twisted and warped version of a Christian missionary wandering around, followed and joined by lots of other people. There's also a cat who swears an awful lot. It was thought-provoking, definitely, but it wasn't really my cup of tea, so I gave that one 2 out of 5 stars overall. The next one I read was A Lotus Face and the Fox, which is by Nagivo, and it was beautifully sad. I really enjoyed that story. I wasn't expecting to, but I thought it was fantastic. I'd never heard of the author before, but it was well worth reading. It very much reminded me of Kij Johnson's style, which was fantastic because I just said Kij Johnson is an author I really admire and love, so I was very happy to discover another author who was in the similar vein. It's about a young fox girl who wants her sister back, and so she goes and visits Lotus Face to ask for Lotus Face's help, and things ensue from then on. I loved the way it was written, it was beautiful, it was lonely, and it was thought-provoking, and I gave that one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next one I read was one that was based on the old story of The Yellow Wallpaper. I've not read The Yellow Wallpaper, but this one is called Creeping Woman, and it's by Christopher Barzak. I haven't read The Yellow Wallpaper, but I had an idea of what the story was about, and so it was interesting to sort of compare what I knew of that story to what this one was about. It was a decently written story. I didn't have any real issues with it, but it also didn't completely capture my imagination because it was sort of a reimagining. So I gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars, but maybe if I had read The Yellow Wallpaper it might have had more of an impact on me. The next one I read was The Sincerity Gate, which was by Britt Mandello, and this one was a very sexually charged story. I liked it overall. It was kind of crazy and mad, so I gave that one 3 out of 5 stars. The next one I read was probably my favourite one from within this issue, and it was absolutely beautiful. That one was The Desert Glassmaker and the Jeweler of Berevia, and this one was by Rose Lemberg. It was beautiful, it was poignant, it was absolutely so well written. It's this story of these two people from different places around the world, and they kind of communicate via letter about the sort of professions that they're in and how much they admire the other one's work, and it was just really beautiful. It was pretty sad, it was pretty happy, and it was just kind of a mix of all the emotions, and I really enjoyed it and gave it a 4 out of 5 stars overall. And the final one in the fiction section was The Spy Who Never Grew Up. This one was by Sarah Rees Brennan, and I have to say I absolutely loved this one. It was fantastic. It was a retelling of Peter Pan, but based in our modern day, and Peter has still not grown up, and he's actually employed by the Queen of England as a spy, and it's absolutely crazy but so wonderful. I just loved it, and I would love to imagine that that is exactly what does happen to Peter Pan after he goes through all the adventures with Wendy. It was just so funny and entertaining, and I loved it, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars overall. Moving on to the non-fiction section of Uncanny, there are a couple of articles that were interesting. Gatekeepers, the Nerd Jock Division by Chris Clue. This one was kind of all about how grouping people into different cliques of society is doing them a disservice. It wasn't really anything I didn't know already, but I liked the article and it was well written, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. The next one in the non-fiction was Growing Up in Hyperspace, and this was by Max Gladstone, whose books I haven't read but I'm interested in them. It was a non-fiction essay about Star Wars and about the influence that Star Wars has had on him and also just on the Western culture itself, and I found it really interesting because, as you guys probably know if you've watched my channel for a while, I wrote my dissertation all about the Lord of the Rings and how that has changed the fantasy genre, so seeing how Star Wars has changed the sci-fi genre was pretty exciting to read, and I really liked that sort of essay. So again, I gave that a 3 out of 5 stars. The next one that I read was Creating a Welcoming Fanish Community, and this was by Isabel Skechta. It was all about conventions and fandoms and how they need to cater to be a welcoming place, not just to the normal stereotype, but also everyone else who is in the fandom. Everyone should be included, and this is something that conventions need to bear in mind, and I really enjoyed the article. Definitely agreed with all of the points that she made. Gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The final one in the non-fiction section I actually adored. It was fantastically written and I was so inspired after reading it. It was called Quest for the SFF Grandmother, and it was written by L.M. Miles. It was basically talking about the fact that women in science fiction and fantasy haven't really been represented as well as they could have been, and we don't really have a grandmother figure of fantasy from way back when. So it was talking about how the author went on a quest to try and find some older female SFF writers, and I loved it. It was inspiring. She introduced me to a couple of new authors that I'd never heard of, and I'm very eager to pick up some of their works after hearing her describe them. I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. It was fantastic. The next section is the poetry section, and I'm not a huge fan of poetry, but I was quite intrigued by these ones. The first one I really enjoyed, and that one was called Tended, Tangled and Veined, and it's by Kayla Whaley, and it was a poem that felt so genuine and so raw, and I felt it was just beautiful, absolutely beautiful, so I loved that one. Gave that a 4 out of 5 stars. And then, as I say, the other two poems I wasn't a huge fan of, sadly, because I do find poetry is quite selective, I guess. The Exquisite Banality of Space by Leslie Anderson just didn't work for me at all. I gave it a 1 star, wasn't interested. Narrative of the Naga's Heirs was the other poem, and that was by Brian Warrer, and again, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I liked it more than the other one, but I wasn't a huge fan, so I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. The final ones that were in the magazine are the miscellaneous articles. So this time they were interviews. There was an interview with Maria Devana Hadley, and I was really intrigued by it and I loved it, and it was 4 out of 5 stars from me because I really liked the article. We also had an interview with Chris Barzak, and again I gave that a 4 out of 5 stars because it was really interesting. I loved seeing interviews with authors. I think they're just fascinating people, and it was really cool to see that. Overall, it was a great mix of stuff, definitely one that I will continue to subscribe to. I gave it overall a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So I would love to hear if you guys are subscribed to any SFF magazines of any kind. They can be digital, online, or anything physical, totally up to you. But if you have any short story recommendations, short story author recommendations, or indeed SFF magazine recommendations, then please do feel free to leave them below because I'm always on the lookout for more. I've been loving the short fiction recently. It's been something that I've really enjoyed whizzing through and discovering new authors, so definitely let me know your thoughts down below as well. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.